Hi, the Old Geek here, and I'm going to take a look today at something frightening. Something so terrible that younger gamers recoil in fear whenever it is mentioned. Something so reviled that Wizards of the Coast attempted to hide that fear through mockery. What is it? THAC0. More specifically, this video is a reaction to a thread on a gaming subreddit. A user posted a poll asking contributors to vote regarding whether they used THAC0 in 1st edition AD&D. The votes were overwhelmingly yes. More than 2/3 of respondees stated they used it. The creator of the poll reacted quite badly to this in the comments, and it quickly became clear that it was not the result he was looking for. I see this reaction quite often, an ingrained belief being challenged and being shown to be incorrect. So for the benefit of that Redditor and of you lovely YouTube people, I give you a brief history of THAC0. It is often claimed that the term THAC0 entered D&D parlance with the advent of 2nd edition AD&D. While THAC0 became the core combat mechanic in 2E, it's completely untrue to say that the term was not used before that. Long before that. I have to thank the blog Song of the Blades for most of the research here. The earliest known usage of the term THAC0 was in 1978 in a fanzine produced by UCLA students called Alarums and Excursions. The exact edition of the magazine to feature the term came out in March of that year, before the 1st edition Dungeon Master's Guide, and thus they were using it with mechanics from either Holmes Basic D&D or original White Box D&D. The article doesn't say which. Thus THAC0 did not emerge with 2nd edition. In fact, it appeared before 1st edition. THAC0, of course, is an abbreviation of To Hit Armor Class 0. The first AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide was published in May 1979, and Appendix E in that book was a listing of monster stats. Every monster had a stat for To Hit AC 0. Okay, not the exact abbreviation, but it would be extreme nitpicking to say that it is not their THAC0. The exact abbreviation THAC0 would not appear in official TSR published works for several more years, though a couple of modules that incorporated monster rosters did have something there. In C1, the Hidden Shrine of Tamurchan, all of the pre-generated tournament characters had an AC of 5, so the list of monsters included a number to hit column, which was essentially a THAC5. S4, the Lost Caverns of Sojkanth, has a similar monster roster, with each creature's to hit AC 0 listed in the same manner as in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Later in 1982, the RPGA module R2, The Investigation of Hydael, became the first semi-official adventure to use the exact abbreviation THAC0. However, the RPGA series were of limited availability and not widely available in our shops. The fact that they go for a fortune on eBay is testament to this fact. The first fully official TSR module to use the abbreviation THAC0 appeared in 1983, and it was UK2, The Sentinel. Well done, Britain! What ho, I say! We are still a full 6 years before 2nd edition AD&D saw the light of day. Within a couple of years of UK2's publication, most TSR modules used THAC0 in their monster stats. By 1986 it was more common to find a module with it than without it, and it had also crept into modules in the BECMI line too. Thus the statement that THAC0 appeared with 2nd edition AD&D is objectively false. Now, some sticklers will throw in the argument that THAC0 did not work perfectly with 1st edition AD&D combat, and here they do have a point. This is due to the repeating 20s in the tables. The first 20 allowing for modifications to be included in the roll, the second and subsequent 20s requiring the roll to be a natural 20. For especially weak combatants, such as low-level magic users and the weakest of monsters, the combat tables in 1st edition showed that they needed a 20 to hit armor class 1. Thus the THAC0 notation for them would be 20 star or 20 asterisk. That meant a natural 20 would be needed to hit AC 0. Then after 6 20s in the table, the numbers would start increasing again. A low-level magic user would need 21 to hit AC -5, 22 to hit AC -6. This means a natural 20 and sufficient bonuses to raise that number. So yes, THAC0 as a mechanic does not work 100% of the time in 1st edition combat. But how often does it fail? If you look at the monster manual, the vast majority of creatures have ACs between 2 and 9. The few that have negative ACs are generally high-level creatures, typically extremely rare, and commonly these are creatures that PCs are unlikely to go directly toe-to-toe with. One, for example, is the Kirin, a lawful good creature. Only evil parties will fight those. A DM would have to be particularly nasty to throw these enemies with any real frequency at parties of the levels where those repeating 20s really matter. For an overwhelmingly high percentage of combat encounters, THAC0 works just fine. Let's look, for example, at one of the most played low-level 1st edition modules, the Village of Homlet. There's only one encounter where the DM needs to be mindful of the PCs having to roll a natural 20, and that is the final boss Lareth, who has an AC of -1. Every PC in the party will be able to hit him with a natural 20, so the 21 plus result oddities in the table can be ignored. From the other side of the screen there are some enemies in there with half a hit dice, so they need a 20 to AC 1. But they are unlikely to get attack bonuses, so the DM doesn't need to worry about AC 0 needing a natural 20 only. They need a 20 to AC 1, they need a 20 to AC 0, they need a 20 to AC -1, and any PC with a better AC than -1 at low level is probably cheating. In fact, the only instance I can find of the numbers above 20 being relevant in any low or mid-level module in my collection is with the Will-O-Wisp in A4 in the Dungeons of the Slave Lords. One encounter. I fully understand that the core combat mechanic of 1st edition AD&D revolves around the combat tables, but THAC0 emerged as useful shorthand to speed up play for more than 95% of combat encounters, and thus for many of us it became absolutely integral. I started playing in 1983 with basic D&D and switched to AD&D in 1984, and I used a lot of modules because of my situation in terms of gaming. My friends were scattered over town, I'm disorganised, it was hard to get a regular campaign going, so we relied on adventure modules most of the time. Thus, for me, THAC0 and AD&D are like fish and chips, like curry and naan bread, or like the internet and people refusing to accept that they are wrong. I replied to that Redditor's post saying that I used THAC0 with 1st edition, and I told him why. My comment immediately received a downvote. I wonder who that was from.